Welcome everybody across the world to our webinar on musculoskeletal diseases and the outcome of the research of our PEROSH members. We have participants across the globe from Australia to Colombia, Europe, a lot of them, and a warm welcome to all these participants to this PEROSH webinar. We will present to you a webinar based on a thematic newsletter that was published earlier and on the same topic, that is musculoskeletal disorders. This webinar will last for 1 hour and it will also be recorded. So you can always have a look at the video later on, and we will send all the registered participants, more than 300 these were, we will send them a link where they can have a look at the video later on. And also the presentations of our speakers, we have 3 speakers today, will be uploaded to our repository. So if you have a look at the PEROSH website, we have a repository where you can have a look at those presentations and even download them to read them. 3 speakers. I will introduce each speaker before they start. And we have Joyce Lufting. Joyce is now will monitor your questions and remarks. Please post these questions and remarks in the chat. Some of you are probably familiar with this procedure. And then when the speaker is finished, we'll have a look at what questions are posted, and Joyce will try to do her best to get this question across one of the speakers. If for some reason there are too many questions and we cannot deal with them all, the speakers promised that we will answer these questions later on if you leave also your contact details and a clear name in the chat. Our program includes 3 speakers, one from HSE, the Health and Safety Executive in the United Kingdom. This is a member of PEROSH, and you know what PEROSH is because when you logged in, you saw this slideshow turning around explaining what PEROSH is doing. Another speaker is from France. His name is Laurent Claudon from INRS. That is also a member of PEROSH. And our last speaker, our final speaker, is Werner from IFA, which is the German member, one of the German members of PEROSH, because in Germany we have 2 members, to be honest. Let me introduce Matt Birtles to you. He works at the Health and Safety Executive in the United Kingdom. This is the regulator, the Labour Inspectorate, basically. But they are also doing research, and quite a lot of research, together with companies and sector and branch organizations in the UK. Matt works at the science division, and I'm really curious to hear what he has to share with us. So Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you TNO for hosting the event, and PEROSH of course for making such an event possible. And I hope you all are very well wherever you are in the across Europe or across the globe. I have a presentation, so bear with me for 2 seconds. There we go. That's always a relief, isn't it, with webinars? Over the last couple of years, obviously during, I'll be the first person to say this, and perhaps not the last, but during the COVID pandemic, we've been very busy making our suite of assessment tools a lot more accessible and hopefully a lot easier to use. Musculoskeletal disorders are still a huge issue in the UK. We are making headway, but they still represent around 30% of all of our sickness absence because of work-related ill health. And the time spent taken off work is still considerable, somewhat less now for lower back pain, and the message of perhaps going back to work sooner, not because work's miraculous, but because the mobility is very good for back pain. So getting out of bed and actually moving around is very good. we have reduced the sickness absence rates for back pain, but for upper limb disorders, it's still very tenacious, and people do go off work for quite a significant period of time. One thing that's happened, especially over the pandemic, these are the prevalence rates per worker of musculoskeletal disorders. So taken from the UK workforce, and it's a line that spans 20 years, and certainly the line's going down, and that's a really encouraging trend. The more we work on musculoskeletal disorders, and certainly the more safety practitioners work on musculoskeletal disorders, the more we see that line go down. And the point of interest is the last part on the right hand side of that graph, which is actually our statistics for last year. So many of us are working at home under lockdowns or under hybrid conditions, and because we're compromised in our workstations, unlike being in the very comfortable offices where we have nice adjustable furniture and a really nice setup for many of us, moving that to a kitchen table into a bedroom for about 22% of us in the UK, about 30% on a kitchen table, about 30% had a home office of some kind. But we were concerned about what the compromise would be on musculoskeletal disorders. And I'm very pleased to say that while the DSC hybrid or home working has had an impact, we have seen a slight increase amongst that cohort of workers, about a 14% uptick for that cohort. Actually, across the whole of the UK, across all industrial sectors, which is what this line shows, we have continued to reduce the prevalence of MSDs over the last couple of years, despite what's been happening with us during the pandemic. So how do we go about managing musculoskeletal disorders? I'm sure this is the kind of thing that's very familiar to many of you. This is taken from UK regulations, but it's very, very common across lots of our standards. And the approach to managing MSDs in the workplace is first and foremost to identify those jobs which are the hardest to achieve, the jobs that have the most risk associated with them, or the jobs that the workforce just don't like doing. The way that we go about doing that ideally is through engagement with the workforce. Sit down and talk to them over a coffee, ask the workforce what is it they don't like doing, what are the worst parts of their day, and then sit back and enjoy as they tell you all the stories about the rubbish jobs. We also do risk indicators, of course, and there are keener observations. The Nordic Musculoskeletal Questionnaire is something we use very regularly, amongst with other body maps and other indicators. Once we've identified those rubbish jobs, we try to avoid them. Can't we just leave the objects where they are, or can't we just mechanize them perhaps, or automate them? That can be very expensive, prohibitively expensive for many of us. So if we can't avoid the higher risk jobs, then we go and assess them. We assess in order to understand the risk and prioritize the risk in order to reduce the risk, the next stage of this. We can't always eliminate risk, and that's fine. Sometimes we do have to live with risk, so we can reduce it to as low as reasonably practicable, but we have to then live with it, and that's where the management side of this comes in. In our training, for example, we need to let the workforce know that they're exposed to risk, get our safe operating procedures together so that the workforce can see how to do the job perhaps more safely, one hopes. And then people who are exposed to risk, just have a little bit more closer look at them. Just make those indicators, those kind of surveys, or asking colleagues, how are you doing? Make that a bit more frequent, a bit more regular, so we can monitor them and get them quicker into physiotherapy or occupational health provision, should they need it. But a fundamental part of this entire process is risk assessment. And so one thing we've been working on in the HSC for the last 2 years or so is taking our fairly well established tools and turn them into something new. So the tools, if you're not familiar with them, we have fundamentally 3 tools. These cover about 80% of musculoskeletal disorders. We use the MAC tool for lifting and carrying and team handling. We use the RAP tool for risk assessing pushing and pulling tasks, which is based on the German KIM tool, actually, if you're familiar with that. And then we use the ART tool, which is based on BSCN 11228, QEC and other tools. And the ART tool is for assessing repetitive tasks, the hand-intensive, quite low force, but hand-intensive tasks like packaging. But what we've done with the tools, we've had them in paper versions now, the Mac tool, since 2005. All we've done with them is put them online and made them a lot more accessible to people. And there are a couple of times I'll show you this URL for a website where you can go and have a look. And I would suggest, please do feel free to go and download them for free. It would be great to hear your thoughts on how well they're working, if they make assessments easier. And of course, they've been paid for already once by UK Treasury. They're absolutely free at the point of use. So I would suggest having a look at them. I just wanted to show you one of the tools in action. If you're familiar with the Mac tool, this will be nothing new to you perhaps, but I'll show you how we interact with it online. So here's a task. Let's pretend that these two gentlemen are carrying 40 kilograms, and whatever it is, they're going to carry it for around 8 meters. So how do we go about assessing something like that? Well, we work through the tool. And first of all, it's the Mac tool we'll use. And for the Mac, we have lifting, carrying, or team handling, and we'll use a team handling assessment. With that assessment, it takes us through each individual risk factor one at a time, and for each one asks us to score it against the traffic light system and gives us the very sort of evidence-based parameters for each of those risk factors. So for the first risk factor, we've got about 40 kilograms of weight there, and across the board, you can see that that one would fall into amber, between 35 and 45 kilos. So we'll score in amber and then move on to the next one. The next few risk factors are then about posture. And so once again, we've got a presentation in the app or in the online version of the different risk ranges for green, for amber, and for red, or for low, for medium and high. And in this case, the guy at the back there, he seems to be reaching far away while he's bending at his back. So the load's coming from quite far away. So we'll probably score that a red for the chap at the back. The vertical lift zones, where they're lifting to or lifting from, mostly this will be around waist height, no big deal here, in a nice neutral posture mostly. So we'll score that a green. And then slowly work our way through each of these risk factors. One of the issues here is the grip on the load. They've got a strange grip on the lip of that tub or that thing they're carrying. So we've got green for good grip, amber for compromised grip, or a red or higher risk for highly compromised grip. Probably falls here where the weight of the load's being carried on the fingertips. So we'll call that one an amber. And then finally, carry distance, we can measure this quite easily. It's just fun with mathematics. 8 meters is somewhere between 4 and 10 scores in amber. And you work your way through the entirety of the assessment and it gives you this outcome. One thing that the online version then provides you with are boxes to enter data to explain why is this a problem, why are these risk factors scored as they are, and also really importantly, what can we do about them? How can we reduce those risks? How can we manage that risk or eliminate it if possible? The reason that this online version saves time and it makes it a lot easier to communicate the results is that you can then email yourself the assessments you've just done. I can assure you that here in the UK, it's a miracle that MS Teams is working for us, to be honest. We're not good at IT enough to ever see your results. So if you try this version of the Mac, the Wrap and the Art, and then email it to yourself, none of us will ever see those results. We'll not look at them. They're entirely yours and they're entirely confidential. But when you start to email them yourself, you can build up a catalogue of all your assessments and start to compare, look at your tasks and prioritise where you need to get the interventions. If you have a lot of assessments to do, there is a paid version of this same app. The paid version gives you a little bit more in terms of functionality. So if you have a lot of assessments, maybe you're an international organisation or a multinational organisation, or you're going to be doing a lot of these assessments, it may be worthwhile, buying this version. What it really does is help you with that organisation of information, gives you a dashboard to see your highest risk tasks, the ones that were assessed most recently, and how those tasks change over time. So instead of sending yourself lots of emails of assessments, this will collate all that for you and give you that additional functionality where you've got lots of assessments to actually catalogue and to respond to. So hopefully that's enough to gain your interest. Please do have a look at the apps. We've got the Mac, the RAP and the ART for all kinds of MSD risk assessments. There's a URL there where you can actually go onto our website and download those variants. Please also feel free to come along to a webinar that we run about once a month, just giving a bit more information on how you use these apps and how you can interact with the premium version with the catalogue at the end. There's also videos on our website on how to use them in a bit more detail if you want to have a slower look at how they all work. And for me, that's it for now. So thank you very much for your time. And once again, thank you for hosting us at this webinar. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Matt. That was really interesting. I have a question. You were in the beginning talking about we are doing this, we are doing that. But I guess the tool is being used by workers, by employers, is it, or by inspectors? What is the situation really?
Actually, both.
Both.
In the beginning, back in 2004, if you can remember that far back, the first version of the tool was made for inspectors, and they were going around to work sites, talking to workers, and showing their tool, saying, "Look, I've scored a red, I've scored a green." And because it really enabled communication about the different risk factors, and the workforces and safety managers especially asked, please, can we have a version of the tool? And since then, 2005, we've been producing the same tool for the safety managers in organisations as well as the inspectors. So they should both be using it. There are other variants of risk assessment available both in the UK and, of course, across Europe. And they're all based on very similar data, but by using the same tools, it helps with that discussion about the outcomes and then the potential solutions.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. And do you have any impression of, when it comes to the uptake of this tool, how many enterprises are using it, or?
Of the new version, yes. We get around about 600 new users every month. Okay. And so we launched it towards the end of last year when we had nothing else to do but put on webinars because we're all kind of at home for a long time. So we started to launch it then, and by January it gained traction. And now we're seeing on a normal month 600 new users on a normal month, sometimes going further when you guys in TNO kindly host us to talk about it on a forum like this.
Okay, great. That's really nice to hear. And it's free for download, and there is a free version, obviously, which can be used
absolutely free. Yes,
across the world if people like it and can speak and read English.
Yes, please. That would be fabulous to hear. We know, for example, in Chile, it's in their requirements to use the HSE tools now, coincidentally. So we have an awful lot of downloads from Chile across the world. Yes, please do help yourselves.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, Joyce. What about the chat? Do we have any questions to Matt?
No, I think it was a very clear presentation. Thank you, Matt. Do not have any questions at this moment, but if anyone has any question, please feel free to enter it in the chat box.
Absolutely. If any questions still come up, Matt will be with us until 4 o'clock, and then we will finish the meeting. Please post them in the chat and he can answer these questions. Right, our next speaker is from France. His name is Laurent Claudon from the INRS, the National Institute on Health and Safety Research in France. And in the program, there was a title mentioned Aging and MSD. The focus will be still on these topics. However, the name of the presentation changed a bit to Staying at Work, Return to Work. And then Laurent will share with us the results of 2 recent studies being done at INRS in France. Now, Laurent is an automatics engineer. He completed a PhD in biomedical sciences, and he works already at the INRS since 1993 as a researcher to conduct studies on the evaluation of biomechanical constraints in work situations with high risks of musculoskeletal diseases or disorders, such as slaughterhouses and in the assembly industry. Laurent, may I ask you to share your findings with us? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, hello everyone. This presentation concerns the results of two studies recently conducted at INRS relating respectively to staying at work and return to work. Starting from a schematic relationship between occupational exposure and physical functional capacity, we can represent the exposures by the blue curve and the physical functional capacities by the green one. At the individual level, the physical functional capacities tend to decline over a certain age. Moreover, some studies show that physical functional capacities can also be impacted by cumulative occupational exposures, as the curve in brown can illustrate. Thus, the first study aimed to observe the associations between occupational exposures and certain physical functional capacities with a view to staying at work. But still, according to this schematic approach, when the exposure to physical functional capacities ratio is too high, an accident or disease can occur. This may result in a longer or shorter sick leave and a more or less complex return to work process. It is on this return to work process that the second study focused on. So the first study is entitled Evaluation of Physical Functional Capacities According to Occupational Exposure Encountered During the Professional Career, and it was conducted by Emmanuel Turpin-Legendre. The study was carried out in the construction sector, in which a large number of workers are faced with high physical exposure. However, a physically demanding job increases the risk of occurrence of musculoskeletal disorder. So the aims of this study were to increase knowledge on physical functional capacities according to the exposures encountered during the professional career, and to identify functional capacity tests sensitive to certain occupational exposures, with a view to offering this test to occupational health services of construction sector, in order to allow them to be alerted very early on the potential risk of deterioration in the health of workers. This cross-sectional study was carried out in a collaboration with an occupational health service. A sample of workers presented great variability of exposure to the physical workload has been constituted. The sample included 133 workers, 83 who always had a job with a high physical load, and 70 who started their career with one or more jobs with a high physical load and who then changed to one or more jobs with a low physical load. The job exposure matrix was used to characterize the physical workload according to occupations. You can see the age distribution of the participant in the table on the right. The collection of data concern the physical exposures encountered during the professional career for jobs of at least 1 year, which were retrospectively informed by means of questionnaires: work intensity, manual handling, repetitiveness, use of grip force, awkward postures, vibrations, displacements, and shift work. The cumulative exposure of these constraints was characterized by means of a score, including the frequency, intensity, and duration of exposure. Psychosocial constraints were also evaluated using the Karasek questionnaire and specific question on social recognition, customer relation for the current job. The participant carried out 13 tests of physical functional capacity. As you can see on this slide, they concern maximum strength and endurance for grip and shoulder, manual dexterity with a Purdue pegboard test, balance on one leg, flexibility of the shoulder, flexibility of the back, and thigh endurance with squatting test, arm motor coordination with plate taping test, and the cardiorespiratory capacity, which then allow us to classify physical fitness into 5 categories from very low to very high. To identify variables associated with each score of physical functional capacities test, multiple linear and or order logistic regressions were used as appropriate. Each explanatory variable was adjusted on previously identified confounding factors. Then, stepwise selection procedure was used to return significant factors. Statistical analysis highlighted 5 associations between exposure and physical functional capacity. A high grip effort exposure score was associated with high maximum grip strength. A high squatting exposure score was associated with low thigh muscle endurance. A high whole body vibration exposure score was associated with low arm motor coordination. And a high level of demand was associated with low maximum shoulder strength, and a lack of recognition was associated with low fitness. Thus, 5 functional tests appeared promising to early alert on a decline in functional physical capacities in relation to certain occupational exposures. In conclusion, this study has highlighted the impact of physical and psychosocial exposures during the professional career on the physical functional capacities of construction workers. And it opened perspectives on the interest in observing the evolution of physical functional capacity as a potential early warning signal for the onset of musculoskeletal disorders by identifying 5 promising functional tests. In perspective, an extension of this study will be initiated this year in order to check the validity of the relationships highlighted in this study over an observation period of 5 additional years. Look at the predictive nature of physical functional capacity scores collected during this study on perceived health 5 years later in a prospective pattern, and to observe the evolution of physical functional scores according to the constraint encountered over a period of 5 years. The second study is entitled Success and Failure Factors when Returning to Work After Rotator Cuff Surgery in a Professional Context, and was conducted by Anne Pichenet-Houard. In France, 33% of musculoskeletal disorder recognized as occupational diseases concern the shoulder. The most serious cases require surgery, which leads to an average absence from work of 7 months. The return to work process is complex and depends on many factors. And the few studies on the subjects report a high rate of return to work failure. So the aims of this study were to identify the preoperative predictive factors of the duration of postoperative sick leave in workers with work-related tendinopathy of the shoulder who have undergone surgery. And to identify prognostic factors for the sustainable return to work through the characterization of return to work profiles in the form of stable and unstable trajectories of return to work and no return to work. And at least specify the most relevant tools, questionnaire, tests for early detection of success or failure of the return to work process. Concerning the method, the study included 5 collection time before surgery, before returning to work, 1 month, 6 months, and 1 year after return to work. In the event of non-return to work, follow-up participants stopped 20 months after surgery. A collection time was performed 8 months after surgery if the participant had not returned to work. The average duration of follow-up was 1.6 years. 108 participants were included, 45 males and 63 females, with a median age of 49 years. The data collected included questionnaires, the disabilities of the arm, shoulder, and arm questionnaire, perceived general health, general quality of life score, hospital anxiety and depression scale, kinesiophobia Tampa scale, Nordic questionnaire, questions 1 and 6 of the workability index, willingness to return to work scale, and job demand control support questionnaire. The functional capacity of the shoulder were also evaluated by means of the constant Birtles score and the 400 points assessment. And finally, specific interviews were conducted to identify sick leave, difficulties at work, adaptations of working time or workstation, and other elements. So concerning the results, 20 months after surgery, 50.2% of the participants were still not back at work. For the other participants, the average time to return to work was 7.5 months. A multivariate Cox regression model highlighted that 3 preoperative variables were significantly associated with a later return to work. These were preoperative sick leave duration, high level of physical demand of the job, and the number of total body parts causing pain or discomfort in the last 12 months. And 2 preoperative variables were significantly associated with an earlier return to work. A relatively certain on prognosis of workability 2 years from now, question 6 of the workability index, and the prepared for action category of the readiness return to work scale. 3 typologies of return to work trajectories have been defined. Stable trajectory for participants who did not have sick leave related to the operated shoulder during the follow-up period. Unstable trajectory for participants who had work sick leave related to the operated shoulder during the follow-up period. And no return to work for participants who were still on sick leave 20 months after surgery. The multivariate order logistic regression model highlighted that predictors of a return to work trajectory were perceived health, excellent, very good, or good perceived health, increased by a factor of 5 the probability of being in stable trajectory compared to the unstable trajectory, and by a factor of 10 considering the stable trajectory compared to the non-return to work category. Level of physical demand for the shoulder. Occupying a workstation with little or moderate strain on the shoulder increased by a factor of 4 the probability of being in the stable trajectory compared to the unstable trajectory, and by a factor of 8 considering the stable trajectory versus the non-return to work category. And at least the nature of surgery, the fact of having benefited from reconstructive surgery for a ruptured tendinopathy increased by a factor of 3 the probability of being in the stable category compared to the unstable trajectory, and by a factor of 6 considering the stable trajectory versus the non-return to work category. To conclude, this study highlighted the relevance of monitoring the evolution of many factors during the return to work process following shoulder surgery. Beyond an innovative descriptive contribution on the typologies of return to work trajectory, the study also made it possible to highlight predictive factors of the duration of sick leave and also of the type of return to work trajectory. And all this data comes from validated questionnaires are very easy to collect and readily usable into clinical practice by surgeons, rehabilitation physician, occupational physician, and nurses. Thank you very much for your attention.
Laurent, thank you very much for these 2 studies, really interesting. I have 1 or 2 questions, but first, Joyce, are there any questions from our participants that need attention?
No, I do not have any questions at this moment.
Again, everything is clear. People, please. Sorry?
One will come up soon.
Maybe some will come up. Please feel free to post a question or a remark, you know, that we do appreciate that. Laurent, the first study, you described that it would continue for 5 years after this one. Will this be with the same occupational health service, or are you doing it with others? What is the idea?
It will be with the same occupational service, and it will also be with the same workers. Okay.
Ah, okay.
It's
yeah.
Yes.
And
yes.
And what about occupational health services? Is this, let's say, are these results that INRS is sharing with other occupational health services as lessons learned? What is the approach here?
Yes, of course, we have published the results in a journal dedicated to the occupational services in France. So yes, our idea is to share the data of this study as much as possible, of course.
Yeah. Okay, good. And then about the last study, what I noticed is there is a really long period of returning to work for rehabilitation. And did the researcher or the researchers consider to include also the social dynamic of being away from your job and your colleagues for such a long time? Because this also sometimes is not very supportive. When you are away so long from your work, to return to work, things have changed, you have maybe new colleagues, your job might have changed. Has this been considered by the researchers?
Yes, of course. As you say, it was a long study, and with many data collected. And I cited that data. A lot of data comes also from interviews, and during these interviews, the researcher asked to the workers how was the return to work process in their enterprise. Okay, and they also interview about the social relationships between colleagues and also with the management.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Because apart from the topic, in this case, cuff surgery, also with burnout or other incidents, which leaves workers at home for a long time, you see that it's really difficult to return to work. Yeah. Okay, great. Joyce, there is a question.
Yes, I have a question. Victoria. For the first study, I find correlation between WBV and the neuromotor control highly interesting. What is your mechanistic explanation on this, and is this previously studied?
Oh, okay. Amongst the workers, there are many trucks drivers. Okay, and we made the hypothesis that the vibration from the trucks were transmitted to the whole body and also in the arms. So we think, it is an hypothesis, that the relation was between this that we identified concerns mainly the trucks drivers.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for this question. And thank you.
We have another question.
And another one.
We can share the presentations.
Yeah, the presentations will be shared.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, we will, and also the video will be shared through our PEROSH website. I will say a few words on that later. Yeah, this is available. Thank you very much, Laurent, for these two studies done in France. Thanks a lot. And we will go to our respected German colleague from IFA, And his name is Christian Werner. And Christian is the section manager of machinery safety, industrial security and implants at the IFA. And moreover, he is a certification officer for functional safety according to the Machinery Safety Directive, the EU directive. He is a member of several committees, such as committees in electrical equipment and safety of machines and installations, German Committee of Safety of Machinery and Electrical Equipment of Machines, and he is a member of the Committee for Machines and Safety Components for Notified Bodies in Germany. So he has a lot of committee work to do, I guess, Christian, but he is also doing research, and he will share his outcome of this research with us. Christian, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the very nice introduction, and of course for the opportunity to share our templates we have created during a project with us. Also from my side, a very warm welcome to my speech. In the next round about 12 or 13 minutes, I would like to tell you something about the new risk assessment templates for exoskeletons from the IFA. And I would try to give you some impressions of all the aspects you need to think about when you try to implement an exoskeleton in your facility. Just one short slide for the IFA. So the IFA is an institute of the German social accident insurance, and is mainly concerned with scientific issues relating to PEROSH. And the IFA is located in St. Augustin. You can see it on the slide. That's nearby Bonn. And the DGUV has two other institutes located in Bochum and Dresden. So, okay, why are we working with exoskeletons at all? The answer to this is very simple, because in Germany, the MSDs are the most common cause of absence due to illness. We heard this already in the two presentations before. That's very similar in Germany too. And there the upper extremities account for around about half of the disease. So for this reason, the IFA also focuses on this upper extremities in its investigations. Currently, we have two ongoing projects at the IFA. You can see it on the left side. That's one project called Exo at Work. The Exo at Work is almost completed and dealt with the development of guideline for the evaluation of exoskeletons for the world of work. And hopefully the guideline will be available in a few weeks at the IFA websites. And the second project, you can see it on the right side, it's called EXOE. And there the IFA is working with Airbus to demonstrate the effectiveness of exoskeletons for overhead assembly activities. This project was started 2 years ago, but due to Corona, there were no measurements possible in the facility. So currently, however, we practical studies are starting up again, and hopefully we can come back to you with the output of this project in a few months, or till the end of the year, I think. So, okay. First of all, I would like to show you some regulations we have in Europe and one special in Germany. So here you can see, so in Europe, we have a directive so that everybody or every employer is responsible for carrying out a risk assessment for the work equipment which is provided. And this risk assessment, of course, must be documented. And on the right side, you can see that we have another law in Germany to protect expectant mothers. So we have two regulations here in Germany we have to fulfill. And in order to comply with these regulations, the IFA was asked to prepare a risk assessment template to use for exoskeletons. And this was part of the project EXO at Work I've mentioned before. And yeah, now I would like to show you this template which we have created. So this template is intended to help owners of an exoskeleton to think about all necessary hazards arising by using an exoskeleton. Furthermore, it helps the manufacturer of an exoskeleton to find out what must be considered during the development and what further information has to be given in the documentation for the end user. The template is available free of charge as a fillable PDF file, and you can download it from the IFA website. So here you can see the first page of our risk assessment template, and here you can enter some global things, which company you are, which workplace do you have to consider, which exoskeleton do you use. And in addition, you can see it at the bottom of the page, the results of the complete risk assessment and possible follow-up measures are documented here too, or can be documented here too. Yeah, so this is the table of content of our document. You can see it, it's a very large document. You have around about 32 or 33 sites. But I think it's a very good way to start if you think about hazards arising by using an exoskeleton. So the document is divided in different kind of hazards that can occur when you use an exoskeleton at a facility. Some of these hazards are obvious, I think. Others are not immediately recognizable. Later on, I will give you some examples for the different kind of hazards, and of course, you can decide for yourself whether you would have thought of it or not. Okay, so here you can see one entry in the template as an example. So first of all, in order to assess a hazard, we must find, or we must think about how exactly an exoskeleton works and what can potentially happen. And as an example here, you can see the mechanical hazards. So if we think about mechanical hazards, maybe the exoskeleton has unguarded moving parts. So that could be a potential hazard. The second column is to clarify this a little bit. So to answer the question if this hazard is a possible hazard at your exoskeleton, we give in the second column some hints and possible questions to help by identifying and assess the hazard. And of course, we give you some first suggestions for solutions on how you can fix the hazard or reduce it or totally eliminate the hazard. That's the third column, and there you can find very, very good hints for that. And of course, each risk assessment must include a classification of the risk that the hazard may lead to an accident or not. So we use here some smileys. So if you have a medium or high risk, that is symbolized here with a yellow or red smiley. And from our perspective, if you mark the red smiley, of course, measures must usually be taken to reduce the risk. So if you have not an opportunity, that's a must. And the last two columns here you can mark if you have some actions which are needed. And of course, you have a comment line where you can write something maybe in an action which is required. And so you can go through the whole document and look at each hazard and try to figure out if this is a potential hazard at your exoskeleton or not, and if some actions are required or not. Yeah, we have discussed a possible assessment of the risk for a long time in our project, and we have come to the conclusion that this matrix you see here on the slide gives a good approach to the assessment. So here you can see the matrix relates the frequency of a possible accident on the left side to the severity of damage, the top of the matrix. And for example, if there are fatal consequences or an accident maybe can happen once a day, from our side, the risk is then high and further actions are required. Another example, if only minor injuries are possible only once a year, sorry, the risk is low, and from our side, there are no further actions necessary. Yeah, to give you a first impression of hazards to be considered when using an exoskeleton, I have prepared a few samples on the next slides regarding the hazards. When you think about the mechanical hazards, maybe you have to think about dangerous surfaces. Are there sharp or rough edges or something like that where the owner of the exoskeleton can be injured? But in addition, you have to think about hazards which could arise from some faulty electrical equipment or some leaking parts. So you have to think what happens if some parts of your exoskeleton is damaged. In addition, especially with exoskeletons that are used by several people, we must think about certain hygiene requirements. Maybe you have to raise the question, can exoskeletons be easily cleaned so that no bacteria or fungi can grow, or does the exoskeleton have removable parts for washing it? So we have to think about this question too before using an exoskeleton at work. Yeah, furthermore, there are more examples here on this slide. It must be clarified whether hazardous materials or components are used, or whether the exoskeleton itself emits noise or electric fields or vibration that could be dangerous for the user or for the surrounding people. And another really important aspect is the intended use of the exoskeleton, which is normally specified by the manufacturer. So maybe it is allowed to use the exoskeleton outdoor, or there are some more information provided by the manufacturer regarding the environmental conditions. So you have to clearly find out which specification has your exoskeleton and which can you fulfill and which not. Or another example of an hazard could be parts sticking out of the exoskeleton, which can injure people in the surrounding, or you can be caught by other surrounding machines. You have to be careful when using this. And what many owners also underestimate is the psychological aspect of people wearing exoskeletons. So some employees feel uncomfortable wearing exoskeletons because maybe they are perceived as weak by others. Other employees feel like a robot that you are only there to work harder, faster, and more efficiently if you use an exoskeleton. And yeah, for these reasons, it is from our side very, very important to involve the employees in the decision-making process as early as possible. So when you think about using an exoskeleton in your facility, you have to carry out this process very carefully. So otherwise, there is a risk of psychological stress for the employees, of course. Yeah, and here's another example. So maybe if you want to use an exoskeleton, you need to think about if it must be adjustable. For example, if you used more than one, or if the exoskeleton is used by more than one people. And of course, in general, you must always make sure that the activity is suitable for an exoskeleton and does not lead to other harmful postures or harmful movements being caused by wearing an exoskeleton. Yeah, and on this slide, I have listed some examples of possible hazards that can arise during secondary tasks. So you have to clarify if you can walk or run when you have an exoskeleton, or what is in case of an emergency, can the employee run out of the building if there is a fire or something like that. And yeah, these examples I've given you in the last 6 slides should demonstrate that there are many, many influencing factors that hopefully affects the decision whether or which exoskeleton can be used in a specific working place. So that's the end of my presentation. I know that there were a lot of information on the last slides, a lot of examples, but hopefully I was able to give you an impression of things which you have to consider before an exoskeleton is purchased. And yeah, you can see it here. There's a link to the template. So you can find the template for the risk assessment on the pages of the IFA. Therefore, you can use the link or just only Google it or look at the IFA website and try to figure out the risk assessment on your own. So thank you very much for your attention. And maybe there are some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Christian, for this nice presentation about exoskeletons. Joyce, indeed, is there a question posted for?
Not on this topic.
You can stop sharing, Christian.
Everything is clear, I think.
Everything is clear, yeah. Okay. You can stop sharing, Christian, your screen if you would like to do that. And yeah, I was wondering, because exoskeleton is also, some research has been done in the INRS, I know, especially during COVID, where so many patients on IC units had to be turned every now and then, of course. I remember there was a research done in France where exoskeletons also assisted these care workers to make it more easy, because that was really difficult work. Do you see, Christian, an uptake of the use of exoskeletons in Germany, and what sectors?
Yeah, I think currently in Germany, we are not convinced that an exoskeleton can really help an employee. Right now, we try to find evidences that an exoskeleton can work and can, the employees which take the exoskeleton will not have other disease, because if you have some forces which an exoskeleton move to some other parts of your body, it's not that clear that an exoskeleton really helps. And that's, I think, the main question we try to figure out right now in Germany.
Yeah, okay, that makes it clear. And some other, maybe a very stupid technical question. We have CE marking in Europe. And I was wondering if an exoskeleton is put on by a human being. We have a sort of mix of man and machine. How is this dealing with CE marking? Is the exoskeleton itself, does it need CE marking? Very technical question, but I'm just curious to know.
Yeah, that's it depends on the manufacturer. If the manufacturer says it is a machine and it's okay if you use it under the machine directory, you have to put a CE mark on the exoskeleton. If he says it's an PPE and not a machine, then not obviously, but it depends on the manufacturer how he put it in the market.
How he defines his product. Yeah. Okay, really interesting. Thanks a lot. And thanks a lot to all speakers. But I see a raised finger of Joyce. Perhaps there's another question. Joyce?
Yes, I have two questions, Christian. Someone asks how the smiley faces in the risk assessment are linked to the low, medium, high risk in the relating table.
Yes, that's the link. So if you have a high risk from our side, you have to, or you need to do something. You have further action which reduces the risk. If it's green, everything's fine, so you don't have to do something. If it's yellow, that's you are in the middle. So you try to find some solution to reduce the risk, but if it's not possible, you have to find a good comment for this, why you don't have additional action to reduce the risk.
Okay, thank you. And then the final question, is this risk assessment applicable to both static and dynamic exoskeletons?
Yeah, you can use it for both.
Okay.
Great. I also have a question, not regarding the final topic, but for you all on MSD legislation. Somebody asks that we're currently waiting for a long time for new and updated legislation on MSD prevention. And the person is wondering if in each of your country there's an intention to improve the legislation on MSD prevention. And perhaps it's now easier in England because of the Brexit. And if research can contribute to convince the need of a new legislation. Perhaps one of you can
maybe Matt, if you start.
Yes, I can walk on the very thin ice of talking about Brexit without giving you an opinion myself, but we are looking at some new legislation, or perhaps how we can build on existing legislation. We've inherited, of course, all legislation from Europe, and we're happy to do so. And there are potentially opportunities for us to build on those. We'll certainly share them, and in the main, all the legislation will remain exactly the same as it was, so let's say 5 years ago here in the UK. The one that may potentially change, one that we're looking at the evidence base for at the moment, is for display screen equipment, so DSE regulations or computer workstations, how we go about assessing and risk managing them. We've gone all the way back to the evidence base behind each of the key risk factors, and I'm sure most of us have done some form of risk assessment for computer workstations in the past. And we make these assumptions that good posture, positioning of a mouse and screen and so forth reduce the risk on the individual user. We're going back to the rudimentary basics and refreshing the entire evidence base for this. We will doubtless find that the evidence base is good, and we may just make some changes in emphasis. So maybe some new sort of form of the regulations for us. It won't change dramatically though. It may just be nuanced ever so slightly. Much of the regulations in the UK and our interpretation of European directives, we absolutely appreciate that it's based on two things, and that's a very good evidence base normally, and decades of it being evolved into what it became now. And so to suddenly change it and do something very different would be very naive, I think. And so new legislation may help, but I think there's still a lot of work to do in the UK for the application of the legislation that we already have. we've not finished yet by a long, long, long way.
Okay, thanks a lot, Matt. What about Germany and France? Any developments when it comes to new legislation, specifically on MSD?
No, I don't think so.
No. Okay. Okay, excellent. Then we come to a closure. I guess, Joyce, there are no more questions left.
That was it, indeed.
That was it. That was it. Okay. I would like to thank again all three speakers, and unfortunately I cannot give you a bottle of wine, but this is something that I will give you later on when we meet in person, hopefully. Thanks a lot for your preparation and your contributions. Thanks to all the participants who joined us for 1 hour. And I would like to invite you to visit our website, subscribe to our newsletter and events, follow us on Twitter and on LinkedIn, and then you will get loads of information through PEROSH. Our website can also offer you a repository with a lot of articles, project reports, presentations like the three that we saw this afternoon will be uploaded to the repository where you can easily download it for your own use. So please have a look at our website. And there is also a search function in the website where you can search on any theme where we ever published upon, either a news post, an event, or a report. And it's a wealth of information that you may use. Then finally, I would like to raise your interest for 2 conferences organized by PEROSH or PEROSH members. One is the Wellbeing at Work conference, which will be organized by our Polish partner, Polish Institute, member institute. It is a fully online conference. Have a look at our website. It is in the event list. You can still register, I think, as a participant for this Congress. And this Congress will take place between 13th and the 15th of June. And then there is another Congress also organized by STAMI, which is our Norwegian member. And this Congress is on prolonging working life, the aging workforce, what are the push and stay factors for aged workers to continue or to pension. And this conference will take place on the 21st and the 22nd of September, so after the summer holidays. And it will be a hybrid conference, so you can go there to Norway, Oslo, or you can attend the conference online. Please have a look at our website, the events, and you can click on to the registration page of these conferences. Joyce, thanks a lot for moderating the questions in the chat. And everybody, thanks a lot. And we will be seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.